Okay, so today is Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. I'm Ben Greiner. With me, as always, Chad Calise and Michelle Charles. Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Afternoon.
Hello.
Or wherever
And can you
are.
see
Maybe
it's snowing where I am?
Yeah, looks cool.
Looks like
Yeah,
Charlie Brown.
It does.
yeah. This is that app. Is the name of it. MMHMM. And I think I've used this before. I was just playing around with it. They added some new backgrounds, which are kind of interesting. There's the immersive rain background.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
then
awesome, actually.
they have this one. I'm in the bathroom now, I
That's
guess, talking
hilarious.
to you. And
Your bathroom
now
looks
I'm in a Game
small.
Boy.
You,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool.
Hey.
That's cool, man.
Anyway, we'll go with the plain bricks right now. And what we're going to talk about today is something that came through our support desk, and that is artificial intelligence. And in fact, I wanted to I sent out an email. I don't know if you guys saw it because I know I sent it out rather late. My apologies.
I saw it.
But I put a little quote in there. This quote's actually from the CEO of Ntiva, Stephen Fredkin, and he was interviewed, and I really enjoyed how he ended the interview, and I'll just read it very briefly if you didn't see the email. The next evolution in IT services will be centered on the power of artificial intelligence and harnessing data to make better, more informed decisions, even for smaller and smaller companies. There is a tremendous opportunity to use data more effectively and in an autonomous manner. As business intelligence and artificial intelligence converge, these concepts will become more relevant. And I must admit, I have heard about artificial intelligence, and I think we all kind of have a vague understanding of it, but trying to articulate that in real world scenarios that affect us and affect small business in particular, small, medium businesses, it's still kind of early days, but we're starting to see some of that, and we may not even be aware of it. And one of the things that came up in the one of our questions that we got on the support desk this week was, what is this Cortana email, and why am I getting it? How do I stop it? In fact, it was also, I think, a little concerning. Like the viewer thought, how is it possible that they are looking at my email, they're looking at my calendar, they're piecing it together and telling me, making suggestions. So I thought we'd talk about that a little bit, because I was also a little surprised at the reaction I was getting and hearing from even our own team saying, "Oh yeah, this looks kind of scary." And Chad, we've talked about this before. I mean, I would say every single app out there is collecting this information. Are they making it available to us, usable to us? Probably not. But Microsoft is starting to expose some of this in these Cortana emails, and I think it's pretty interesting. I'll share my screen just to show you an example of what I'm talking about. For anyone who uses Office 365, you probably have access to this. Maybe you could go find these emails in your inbox today. Microsoft started rolling them out in September of last year. And anything Microsoft does, because they're such a huge organization, anything on Office 365, it takes months to roll this out. So I have a feeling some of us had access to this in September, and some of us are just now getting access to it or just noticing access to it. Michelle or Chad, have you guys seen these in your inbox? Have you?
Yes.
I've seen the analytics, but
yeah, let me pull up an example. So here's one example I just grabbed. It's called Your Daily Briefing. There are two types that I'm aware of. One is these reminders where it's saying, "I saw this. There was this exchange I had about a tax package. Please review and complete all documents." So I can choose to either say this isn't relevant to me, delete it. I can choose to say I've done this, or I can choose to say remind me. And if I were to say done, I click this and it marks it as complete. Now, what's going on is it's looking at my emails. It's looking at my to-do app, or it's adding things to my to-do app to set reminders. And it's autonomous. This is artificial intelligence. Obviously there's no one reading this, and this is unique and specific to me. If I've completed something, it won't remind me again. If I don't do anything, I think it shows up in the next daily briefing. I must admit, I'm still learning how to really use this, and I ignored it for months, but then I started using it and I started to find some value in it, and I'm starting to learn more and more about it. So what I also want to point out is if you scroll down to the bottom of this, you're going to see your settings where you can go online and change a few things about how it gets delivered. You can read the privacy statement, and you can unsubscribe, meaning you can turn this off. But Chad, maybe you can talk to this. I'm guessing unsubscribing stops you from seeing this information, but it doesn't necessarily stop Microsoft from gathering this information.
No, they're going to collect it no matter what.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and let me just.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to show that that's one type, and then there's one other type of daily briefing. That's the same one I just looked at. These look very similar. Share. Here's the other one. Oh, wait, sorry. Try this again. Why am I looking? Okay, maybe it would help if I got rid of that screen and try this again. Share. Here. Okay. Does this look different? Focus time, catch up on messages. So the other briefing that I've noticed it will do is it will look ahead and look at your calendar and find blocks of time and say, would you like me to book some focus time, message time, take a break and learning? And I did this just to see what it would do. Obviously, you can try this and change your schedule after the fact. But what it does is it literally puts, 1.5 hours of time on Friday. It found some areas where I should take a break. Whether or not I follow my calendar and take a break is another issue altogether. It blocked out some time on my calendar for me to focus and do some things. And I'm just trying it out to see kind of what it does and how it works. But I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Michelle, you said you've not noticed it. Maybe you could go, find these and see if they show up. Chad, you said you've seen them.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you worked on or used it at all, or?
No, I haven't. The way that I manage my calendar is I build those things in already. To make sure, but I see where this would have a lot of value for people. I mean, one of the things that I really like about this, I mean, whether someone uses it or not, is you kind of touched on this before. These companies are collecting this information, whether we know it or not, right? And there's nothing we can do to stop that. Because when we opt in, when we create an account, and we sign up, and we agree to, the EULA and all that stuff, terms of service and everything, that's what we're agreeing to. We're agreeing to allow them to basically collect information about how we use the platform, when we use it, from what devices, with who, and what context. So it's nice to at least get some transparency into that, so that we can use that information. Right. And so I think it's GDPR compliant, right? If anybody has any concerns about any of this, sure, there are some issues. You have to be concerned, about your privacy when you're using these messages, for example, because if you're using Cortana, for example, like someone could overhear everything. If you're working on sensitive projects or sensitive things, you might not put some headphones on, right, and protect your privacy.
There's a lot. Are you talking about the like Siri-like aspect of Cortana?
Yeah, because you can within this, there's other functionality, right, where you can have your most prioritized emails read to you. You can, it'll do a lot of things, right? It's just scratching the surface of the things that it will do. But it's just something to think of every time we embrace a new tech in our lives. We just have to consider, what we have to change to make sure that we're maintaining our privacy, and it's not hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, the promise of all of these things, whether it's Siri or Cortana or Alexa, is that they will become personal assistants to us, right? And I think we're starting to see some of that happen, for better or for worse. I mean, it's still overwhelming. Sometimes it's hilarious or confusing what they're trying to help us with,
Mhm.
or sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't work well. Um, but certainly Microsoft isn't the only one doing it. And I know Siri, Siri will make adjustments and suggestions for you based on if it sees in your calendar that you're at home, but you need to go, say, to the dentist. It can make suggestions like you need to leave now in order to get to the dentist. I know it can do that. It can do some things like if I always open up the news app in the morning, then when I do a search, that news app will show up as like the top automatic hit. Those are the types of things that artificial intelligence is learning how I'm using the product and making changes based on that. And
It may
sometimes, like I
be.
said, it's very helpful. Sometimes it doesn't work so well.
Yeah, that's a really important point because a lot of it also is just people's comfort levels. Everybody's going
Hmm.
to be different. Like for example, I'll use myself as an example. I may not have much use for some of these things, but I do have a use for something like we're already using, some of us, this AI in our lives in ways we may not know of, like you mentioned, Ben. Michelle and I and you, we may have like I have a Nest in my house, right? And
Hmm.
I like that because I don't have to interact with it. I don't have to think about it. It manages, the HVAC, the heating and cooling in the house
Hmm.
based on historical information, and
Right.
it sends me an update once a month. It tells me like, what's up, and that's useful, right? Having to kind of interact with Cortana or Siri, whatever, initially requires some investment, right, of
Hmm.
time to set it up and kind of make it so that it has value for you. But I think a lot of people have this impression that AI is just going to like automatically do all this cool stuff.
Right.
It's not really the case. Like we're not really there yet, right? AI still, we shouldn't even call it AI yet, to be
Hmm.
honest. But the
Yeah.
marketing folks, we have to collaborate with them. So one of the things about these tools is, like to your point, Ben, like you have to kind of shape the way you work around it a little bit to get any value out of it.
Hmm. And you do have to use it in order to understand how to use
Yeah,
it, and in order for it to get better and to
right.
learn things. And that's where I was a little surprised yesterday when I heard some conversations about, oh well, this is the beginning of Microsoft like spying on employees and things like that. It's like, okay, let's calm down. I'm first of all, I'm sure those spying on employees, has been a concern for many years
Long time.
before
Yeah,
Cortana,
I'm
before
sure.
Microsoft. Um, and I personally view this as a tool that is just exposing the sheer volume of data that
Yeah,
we have stored and making it somewhat useful. And
yeah.
I think it's a huge step forward. Um, and I'm actually impressed with what they're doing. Um, and I know Apple's working on it. Obviously, we've talked about Microsoft. I don't know. I got to believe Google has something like this. Do they have anything in Workspace? Do we know? I
Yeah,
mean, we
they
know they
do.
collect data. There's no
And
doubt.
everything, yeah, everything is kind of for them, I think, tied back to Google Home, right? Like
Hmm.
their Alexa, their version of Alexa. I think a lot of that is integrated there at the hardware
Hmm.
level. Everybody has a different approach, right? Same with Alexa. You kind of tie your identity to a device,
Hmm.
rather than like an identity. You just log in and it just does all this stuff. Microsoft is a different thing. It's tied to an identity, and then if you're using any Microsoft devices like Xbox or Windows 10 or something, it's all integrated across those. I know more people with Xbox that are using these tools than anything else. That Xbox seems to be kind of a big pivot point for a lot of
Hmm.
things, because your Xbox you can integrate with. It can kind of be the center of your house.
Yeah.
It can really connect to all kinds of stuff and do a lot of things. And that's been true for a long time. So, I think a lot of Xbox users, a lot of gamers are very fluent. They've gotten a lot of value
Hmm.
out of this for a long time. But you're right, Ben. Like this isn't new. Like this, whatever we want to call it, if we want to think about it as surveillance, that's fine. But I think there's healthier ways to think about it. And this kind of helps, I think, when we can see for ourselves some of the value, that this data can give us. I like that transparency personally, because if they're collecting it, why can't we have access to it, right?
Yeah. Speaking of surveillance, so our boys were home from vacation or from school here, and they've now gone back to school. But so apparently Xbox, and they have an Xbox, and when they were kids, we must have set it up with an account notifying Microsoft that they were,
Of age.
not adults,
Sure.
and it was linked to my account. So I've got two boys home, and they both spent the weekend playing Red Dead Redemption. And it was Sunday night. I got an email that said, Colin has spent 40 hours playing Red Dead Redemption. And I was like, what?
Sure. Yeah.
And I went to Colin and said, hey, you realize you spent this much time playing Red Dead? He's like, what? How do you know that? What?
I was cooking and I was on the phone and I wasn't playing the whole time.
I wasn't doing that. Elijah did some of it. Yeah. So yes, there is the certainly the potential to surveillance somebody, whether it's a child or an employee, is there, and you hope that if anyone's doing that, it's in full transparency. And I think the worst that we see is when organizations do ask us, Chad, to say, hey, can we do this? And we're like, well, technically, maybe. Is that in your employee handbook, or have you notified your team about it? And it's like, no, but we're the business. We can do this, right? It's like, well, that's not really a good idea, is it?
It's important to be transparent, I think, and set people up for success, because the three of us, we take it for granted that we work around this stuff all the time, and it's not that intimidating to us. We know that if we dig into something for a few minutes, it's going to make sense and answer our questions. But not everybody, experiences it that way. And it's really, we're dealing with, yesterday, a friend of mine, her daughter, her 12-year-old daughter, committed suicide. And it was a result of a lot of these kinds of things, right? The parents monitoring devices really hard and surveilling that, and trying to, solve a cyberbullying problem that she was having. And they went about it the way a lot of non-technical parents, with not a lot of experience in technology, would do it, right? They put surveillance, apps on her devices, but still, we're communicating with her in person and trying to maintain the relationship. But, and who's to say that that was the reason, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have to be really, really careful, because it's easy, whether people are right or wrong, if they feel that way. We have to validate that, and we have to work with them and maybe circle back in another way. But that's why the first impression really matters. And when organizations just inflict this stuff on people, they're going to get pushback, right? But if they go about it in a way that's a little more intentional, it might be slower, but with intention and educating people about this and showing them the kinds of value that they can get out of it, I think it can really, make or break a program like this, because it just is way too easy for people to get the wrong idea.
Yeah, exactly. If you can get value out of it, that makes sense. But Chad, this turned dark. This live stream.
Did,
Sorry to hear
awful.
that.
It's been a hard couple of days.
Parents' greatest fear, losing a child in any way.
So they feel horrible, because they thought they were just doing the right thing. But some of the messages that she left behind were contrary to that. And it's really hard, to justify that, when you feel there's a need, and it's really hard to resist that when you feel there's a need, and parents are just doing the best they can. But I bring that up because that is one end of the spectrum where this kind of stuff can go really south and make someone feel that they don't have any agency. They don't have any freedom, and that's, we got to be careful with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm kind of speechless right now. So, but I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's I don't even know what to say. I'm not going to say anything. Other than that's terrible.
It's
and I feel
tough.
for them. I feel greatly for them.
It's hard.
So let's see. We can wrap it up here. We don't need to take the full time, but I did want to just make sure everyone was aware that Cortana, or at least the daily briefing part of Office 365, rolled out late last year. By now, everyone who has Office 365, I think, should have this as part of their routine, unless you unsubscribed. If you unsubscribed and you would like to resubscribe, I believe there is a way to do that, and I think you
And your
go
settings.
to cortana.microsoft.com. Yeah, Cortana.office.com. Sorry, office.com. And you can turn your Cortana briefing on or off. In fact, let me just share my screen here. We'll do one more quick share.
And keep in mind, turning that off does not stop Microsoft from collecting these statistics, right? So those analytics are going to continue to be generated behind the scenes. It's just that we're no longer going to be, kind of in the loop. Yeah, there you go.
That's right. That's right. So if you log into office.com and you go to cortana.office.com, there might be an icon. I don't know. I just know this is how I got to it. And if you click the unsubscribe button, this is where you will be taken, at least for one of those daily briefings. It might be slightly different for the other one. So I can turn this on or off. I can decide when to get it. I can change my time zone, and then I can learn more about exactly what this is doing. Why am I getting this? Something to note is if you're using Outlook Web Access on the web, or Outlook for Mac, you're going to get the full featured version, the adaptive version. If you're using anything else, like Apple Mail, for example, to view your Office 365 email, you're going to get the HTML version, which does not have all the features. So keep that in mind. If you're like, Ben, how did you set the reminder or tell the app that you were, completed your task? I can't do that. It may be because you're using the HTML version. So this really gives you a lot more information, including additional links. And then I also found this, which I included in the email today that I sent out. What can you do with the briefing email? This is a really good summary. And of course, it works on iPhone or the Mac, and it's very short, and you can opt out. Yeah, so all the standard stuff, including an FAQ. So be aware of it. Try it out. Turn it off if you don't like it, but certainly know that doesn't stop Microsoft from collecting that information. So I think it's a good thing. I recommend take advantage of it. See if it does help you. Obviously, if it doesn't, turn it off. But all this stuff, though. Whether it's it's worth trying out. Whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Siri, all this stuff is getting better. And I think what's frustrating is when it doesn't work. Like, it worked last week. Why is it not working, this week?
Right.
And I always have to tell myself that this is still an amazing thing. Like, when we were kids, the fact that I could speak out loud and say, "Hey Siri, turn off the dining room lights," and it would just do that, was science fiction. But Siri just said, "Okay." So yeah, she just turned off the dining room lights.
Yeah. It's an improvement.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty, when you really think about it. What's that, Michelle?
It's an improvement from the clapper, turn on, turn off.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The old clapper.
Yeah,
remember that?
For awesome.
Yeah. What's the history of that type of stuff? The clapper is a good example of an early iteration of clap on, clap off.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to use it for the stereo. We didn't plug it into lights. We just plugged it into the radio. And you'd double clap and you'd have music on. That was as good as it got. You had fixed station or whatever it was, but we feel like it was like, that was pretty rad. That's come a long way for sure.
Very cool. There's probably a way to, hey Siri, when you hear a clap, do something. You could probably build that in. What does Apple call their framework for building things like that, Chad? Do you remember?
ARKit, their HomeKit.
Well, but they made an easier, GUI version where you can piece things together. Not Automator. That was the early.
Yeah, Automator is awesome. That is a triumph.
What is it's on iOS.
Shortcuts. You're talking about?
Is it shortcuts?
Talking about shortcuts? I use shortcuts a lot. In fact, the kids and
Yes,
I,
shortcuts. You are
yeah,
correct.
shortcuts is awesome. It is really awesome to be able to, like, for example, LJ and I, our 13-year-old or soon to be 14-year-old, she was like, "Hey, how can Chad? Do you know how I can?" Because she's my stepdaughter, she calls me Chad, not Dad. How can we convert like a video to a GIF? Isn't there a way we can just do that without downloading an app? And I was like, oh, there's got to be. So like we went through this whole, spent like some of our evening after dinner figuring out how to make this short. And you can literally do pretty much. I mean, I don't want to like, say that ditch the app store, but you almost could ditch the app store with the power of shortcuts. It's amazing.
Yeah, Shortcuts is available on iOS. It's not, at least not on Catalina. I don't know if it's available on Big Sur. I haven't looked into it, but I remember playing around with it, and the video to GIF feature I see is right here, Chad.
Yeah.
And they give you a bunch of things based on what your HomeKit settings are, because I see a lot of Nest features built in here because I have a Nest. And
just be careful.
Like,
I mean, there's a caveat. A lot of folks are not going to be enterprising enough to like make their own shortcuts, even though you can in a few short steps. A lot of folks have made their shortcuts available to download. Just be cautious. We haven't seen malware embedded in shortcuts yet, but I'm sure it's coming because a lot of kids are into it. Especially the kids are doing shortcuts crazy. And so just be mindful of where you're downloading your shortcut from if you choose that.
as always, be careful. You get it from Apple approved sources, the App Store, or it looks like they have a shortcut gallery. And that reminds me, one last thing I'll mention is kind of the early days of automation. Before HomeKit, you would use maybe a dedicated app. What's the one I'm trying to think of? I had like some outlets that I could turn on or off with an app.
Sure.
Wemo,
Philips.
I think is the
the
brand name. Yeah. And of course there's the smart thermostats, and there's all this stuff. So recently we had a light that was turning on or off at the time we did not want it to. And for the life of me, I could not figure out which automation was controlling that light.
It's a real
because there were
problem.
just too many ways in, and every way I looked, I'm like, I can't find it. Like, why is it doing this? So that can be a frustration too. Yeah.
And that brings up the larger conversation too of it's really easy. You hear me use fancy words like, attack surface and, threat models and things like that. But our attack surface is really like how easy we make it for criminals to, choose our number, right? When they're walking down the proverbial street and looking at bicycles to steal, we want to try to make our lock look kind of intimidating. And one of the things that we can do to make that our lock look more formidable to a criminal is to consolidate those platforms, right? So if we have 6 apps that we use to manage our house with, our attack footprint is huge compared to what it could be, right? So we want to think about that. If we're using one for lights and one for thermostat and one for this and one for that, there are some ways to consolidate those things, and that can give us some peace of mind.
Yeah. And as the technology gets better, it's easier to do that.
It is.
So certainly looking back on it, I think I ended up like resetting everything and just doing it through HomeKit. So to your point, it was easier for me, and my attack surface was smaller.
Smaller. And that's a great point too, because a lot of times when we do consolidate, we'll find, oops, my camera just timed out. We will find.
I just clapped and your light went off, Chad. I'm
easier.
sorry.
Yeah, it works. It works like a charm. Making things consolidated often, to your point, Ben, has some added value, which is making it easier. So keep that in mind.
Simpler, easier. Okay, with that, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Later. Bye.